So I think we can get started. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good midday, good afternoon, and evening to some of you. Thank you very much for your interest in this seminar and for joining us today. I'd like to start with some practical things. We chose to have the speakers speak one after the other and have a discussion afterwards. This meeting will be recorded and the recording will be made public after this meeting. I will send an email after today's seminar with the link to everyone who's joining or to everyone who has been subscribed. After the presentations, there will be time for discussion and questions. Please raise your virtual hand to ask a question and put your questions in the chat. During the presentations and discussions, you can also ask questions through the chat. Chat is monitored by myself and my colleague Hanne Bakelands. If there are other issues, in the meantime, please use the chat as well. But first, a few words about who we are. My name is Bert Quintins. I am a coordinator at the Compassionate Community Center of Expertise at the Vrije Universiteit Brussel in Belgium. We are an interdisciplinary center of expertise, bringing together 11 research teams from different disciplines, from the health sciences, sociology, psychology, educational sciences, architecture, and others. We build expertise through research. We provide expertise by publishing research, but also through workshops or seminars, such as this one today. And we also build networks with partners, both in and outside of our university. This seminar is already our 7th seminar of our Center of Expertise. We organize regular seminars on diverse topics that relate to serious illness, death, dying, and loss. We try to make our seminars relevant to a wider audience, not just to researchers. Our seminar of today regards the role of museums, the role museums can play around serious illness, death, and dying and loss. Such topics affect us all, and therefore also people who work in or people who visit museums. Additionally, museums display works of art which often portray scenes and situations of serious illness, death, dying, and loss. With this seminar, we hope not only to inform you, but also to inspire you to explore how museums can be part of a public health approach to the end of life in your city or your neighborhood. So today we bring you 4 esteemed speakers in 3 different presentations. And we'll start with the first speaker. I'll happily announce Lieven De Visch, who is coordinator of presentations at the museums in Bruges, Belgium. He works alongside and together with the curators on all major loan exhibitions of the museums in Bruges. He further coordinates, initiates, organizes, and creates visitor tools, guidance, and audience programs at all of the museums in Bruges. One of those museums is the old St. John's Hospital Museum, which gives perspectives on 800 years of care in the city. I will stop my presentation and then Lieve can share his presentation.
Okay, hi all. Can everyone hear me? Okay. I'm not that good in Zoom, so I was messing it a bit up. I'm sorry for that. So I tried to share it. Okay. Can you see my presentation? Is it in presentation mode? Because I can see it now. No? That's okay. Okay, thank you. So I was introduced very well. Thank you for that. So I can skip that first lines. My presentation is about St. John's Hospital, and the undertitle is A Place to Heal. And today in this talk, I will take you on a tour in St. John's Hospital. It's part of the 13 locations of Museabrugge. And the main question for me today in my presentation is how does a century-old museum collection of the St. John's Hospital, where you see here a snapshot of a painting that shows a view of the 18th century old hospital, but how does that old museum collection can still remain relevant engaging today for visitors? And also, how do our exhibitions and museum operations focus on the themes that are central today in this seminar, and link also to the DNA of that historic hospital as a place of life and death? In December 2015, last year, that St. John's Hospital was completely renewed. It is a medieval hospital. It's located in the heart of the historic center of the city of Bruges, and it's founded in the 12th century. It's now a museum about more than 800 years of health history. But before looking at the current museum, I will take also a look to the long process that preceded the redesign of the museum, because in parallel with the process of the museum, team thinking about the content, about the scenography of the new museum, we have had also two major exhibitions, and those were very important because they had their own trajectory, and they had also their influence on the content that we used for making the new museum. So the decisions, that we made then were a bit influenced by that two major exhibitions, and they link, of course, to the topics we tackle today. Those exhibitions, they were in 2022 and 2023. They were kind of like an exercise for all the artists, for the curators, in translating the specific history of the DNA of the historic building in what we call a meaningful way for the visitors today. And central was the idea of the place of the healing museum, of a museum that could have that function. The first exhibition was that of Ottobong Nkanga, called Underneath the Shade We Lay Grounded. In this exhibition, Ottobong Nkanga, she wove together various forms of art, including big installations, sculptures, drawings, tapestries, but also poetry. On the ground floor, you see that on your right side, and also in the wooden attic, the 13th century wooden attic of the St. John's Hospital, St. John's Hospital. She created there like a cool dialogue between her own works, new, old works, but also with the collection she selected from Museum Brugge. And at the same time, she wanted to also create a parallel, a dialogue with the visitors, with the historic St. John's Hospital and with the city of Bruges. She created like a kind of environment to relax, a place of what she called contemplation and relaxation through her connection with art. And central in her vision was the idea of the concept of grounding. It's also in the title, but it's an idea that cannot be explained in just one way. It's on the one hand, she saw grounding as something very literal, very symbolic, and literally getting down to earth. It refers to the cycle of life and death. So when you die, she says, you die, but you also become part of a regenerative cycle, becoming food for the soil, becoming minerals to give birth to plants and also to other life. So the idea of playing with life and death can be found in all of her works. She placed there in the space, into her tapestries, but also in the kind of sculptures. You see that on the right picture. She took wood, dead wood from the environment. She made a sculpture and she made a new sculpture with it and created also new life with it. So it's very poetic, you can say. And the dialogue with the history of the building was also crucial for her and for her exhibition. For Ottobong, grounding was the idea of slowing down, of stopping, of seeing the whole exhibition as a kind of exercise to cure, to heal, within the context of the building that was former hospital in the Middle Ages, and now has that very symbolic idea of still being a healing place, but now as a museum. So the artist has combined there the old collection pieces, and she took the relics. You see it on the right picture there, the relic of Ursula. It's one of our top collection pieces of Hans Memling. But she created a world of art that responded to her idea that art effectively could heal. As a public mediator at the time, this idea led me to work on a meaningful public program for the expo. The idea of the Healing Museum was central for me. how can we use the museum in the context of the expo to create a program that can have a healing effect? And this led to the collaboration with Vrije Universiteit. Vrije Universiteit. I asked Peter how to to say who they are, and he said we're Vrije, a non-profit network organization that deploys art, music to connect people and their grief, and they built as a VZW, as an organization, a European mourning culture by organizing hundreds of local consolation concerts. So they were partner in the public program we called the Healing Museum, which resulted in some major events, and I will discuss two of them. It's called the Grote Oversteek, or the Big Crossing, and the Soul Repair Café. I'll start with the first one. As part of the public program, we did the Soul Repair Café, an addition, because it was an existing concept of them, where we turned the museum into a place for what we called an intimate encounter between artists and performers on the one hand, and people with a history of loss on the other hand. As part of the Healing Museum, we transformed our museum location in a kind of atmospheric, intimate space, and a place of warm comfort where visitors could express loss, grief, and sorrow. So there was a call for people to share their stories, stories about someone they loved and they lost, or stories about someone they had a memory of and they missed today. And Vrije, they made like a consolation team of artists that listened to all those stories and created new stories, created new pieces of art that could comfort again the people who wanted to share the story there in the Soul Repair Café, to literally repair their soul and to heal in a way. As a result, so the participants, of course, they could take those memories, those songs, those poets home, but without going into detail there. But perhaps for the discussion later, it's an open question in how far we could go as a museum, because that was very difficult. We're not therapists. We're a museum, we're exhibition makers, and there you saw that sometimes even for the artists, those kind of talks and those kind of healing places were too intense. But maybe that's an interesting question for later. The second part of the public program was also focused on saying goodbye, on farewells, because nearby the museum, also with Vrije, we organized the Great Crossing on the Brugse Rij, the Grote Oversteek on the canals in Bruges next to the museum. Together with residents and visitors of Bruges, we launched thousands of floating candles. It was a bit of a candle for every deceased Bruges resident to give the loved ones a very last lap of honor, to say. And it was very successful. It was very intimate. It was very impressive that more than 1,000 people of Bruges, it was right after the Corona period, so it was like a very strange period. And with the Grote Oversteek of the Big Crossing, we wanted to bring all those people together to give those who had lost someone a very last lap of honor in the form of 1,000 floating lanterns on the river of the Rije. We also combined it with a nocturne in our museum, where the expo was open until late. So many residents and visitors came together for like a very meaningful, magical moment as closing of the expo. That was the first trajectory we did before reopening St. John's Hospital. The second one was the second great exhibition, was in 2023. It's called, oh, I lost my Face to Face with Death, sorry. To be honest, it's not the best title ever, but it allowed us as a museum to let one of our masterpieces shine and to connect also with the same ideas we had with Ottobon and Kanga. It was all about this piece of work. It's The Death of Mary by Hugo van der Goes. It's one of our masterpieces. It's 15th century Flemish primitive. And although the type of the expo was completely different, it was Otto Bangakanga was contemporary art and sort of mix with ancient arts versus a very classical ancient art expo this was. But there was a constant because we used the symbolism and the history of that old medieval hospital to bring a story about that, about mourning, about saying goodbye to the one you loved. And in that sense, the content of the expo did connect strongly, of course, with the idea of the museum as a place for healing again. Because of the way we as a museum told the story, the choice of the objects, and the way we dealt with it through our public mediation. And you see here, central in the story was that 15th century masterpiece. You see it in the picture on your left. But the idea was not that the art historical angle was most important. It was rather the timeless and universal power of that fully restored work that still did something. That's something with the visitors today. It was so powerful that we didn't need to use that historical angle to tell the story. We did it through 5 universal themes reflected in the artwork, but also with 5 contemporary masters that were kind of the narratives for the themes that also made, a bit like in Otto Bongakanga's exposition, let the visitors slow down into the expo. And the themes were also linked to themes we did before, like, for instance, the idea of saying farewell, but also other ones that had a more historical or art historical angle. But parallel to the previous expo, the museum also thought and sought to bridge the gap to a meaningful public program. And in this expo, I found it in the idea that Hugo van der Hoes, the painter, the story goes that he was once tormented by dark thoughts, and it was said that he was healed by hearing the harp of David playing. So he was healed by music. So we chose for the second public program to choose Music is My Medicine as the central theme, where we let the performing arts play a big part central in the museum that for the second time became a healing place. And the direct link to the expo was a tool we made for it. The tool was called Music is My Medicine. In the expo themselves, you could, at the end, you had like an outro where we did also the story of Hugo van der Hoes, healed by music. And there you could put on a headphone where you could listen and see 3 testimonials. The first testimonial was this one from Paul. I will let him a bit shut up because he's interfering my talk. But the idea was that there were 3 testimonials from individuals for whom music had played a very important role in processing a kind of therapy, you could say. And one of them was Paul. You saw. You can see still his testimonial on internet, on YouTube. But there he said that therapy, music for him was therapy for the fact that he lost his mother. And so there we used him as an artist for this kind of tool for the visitors. The visitors itself, there were 2 other testimonials. There was one of a sister who lost her brother, who was a musician, and there they also used music as a kind of therapy because they sung along with the last song he ever recorded, and it was like a very emotional saying goodbye to her brother through music. And the last one was Arlo. She said goodbye to her former life because she did top surgery, and there was a very important moment in her life where music played a role. So we took that idea and we put it into that tool that people could listen to, and they could, as a visitor, add their own music and said also why that was also therapy for them. But the same idea returned in the public program, the program that followed. In the attic, we organized a series of events where music was therapy, for example, for the youngsters. We have also a big group of youngsters connected to the museum, where they could express their own feelings into linked to the masterpiece, but into music, and they could perform it also for a live music. This are two of the pictures we took. We have several ones of them where you see them live in action. We had also a very interesting program with CAAP and Vrije, two of our cultural partners in Flanders, where we ordered a new creation, Emerge at the St. John's Hospital, at the intersection of composition, improvisation, and psychiatry. The framework of the expo gave a kind of creative assignment to the composer Susanna Bloem and saxophonist Matthias de Kraan. And to this end, the Susanna Bloem and de Kraan, they went into residence into the St. John's Hospital in direct presence of that painting of Hugo van der Goes, The Death of Mary. And there they made like a composition, and afterwards they discussed the fact, or they discussed the effect that music could have on visitors, because Susanna Bloem is also a researcher, composer with a PhD on the link between time, experience, mental health, and she works at the interface of psychiatry, music composition, and history of science and philosophy. So that kind of creation of assignment was for her a really interesting thing to do. It was also performed at the attic in the Healing Museum. So I will use my remaining time to come back to St. John's Hospital. In 2024. We opened that museum after the two temporary exhibitions. The museum reopens with the permanent exhibition. I think there's too little time to go into detail, and I strongly recommend that you visit our museum. It's open, but I will conclude this presentation with some anchor points which hook on the themes I've just touched, and we are going to discuss, of course, this afternoon. Because in St. John's Hospital, we have several works by Hans Memling. You see one on the right side, on your right side. They were commissioned by the hospital sisters and brothers, but much of the older and other collections, they were also commissioned by the hospital residents at the time in the Middle Ages. They were the hospital brothers and sisters that ordered paintings, and they usually help them in their daily task and their nursing duties or overall activities. And some of those pieces had also like a kind of specific message to the visitors then, usually of course, from a Christian, religiously oriented nursing perspective. And the hospital residents also left behind very other objects like suitcases, devotional objects. You see them on your left side. You have there the relics, ornaments, and so on. But also all those objects, they have like a history on their own and a story that is fully linked to the way the hospital residents and the visitors lived there since the Middle Ages and later. So the big challenge for us as museum professionals was how do we make this collection relevant today without visitors getting lost in a very complicated medieval context they do not understand. And for us, the key there was, of course, the design, the new scenography, and the storytelling, because after all, we wanted to make a kind of museum. You won't be visiting with your head in the first place, but with your heart. You don't need to know anything about history or healthcare, but you can appreciate the collection at St. John's Hospital with your heart. And that's why the anchor points of the visit and the itinerary do not lie in the past, but in today's society. And that's very important for us. We took also 4 universal themes as the backbone of the story of care and well-being, and we searched how the historic collection could respond to them. Those 4 themes are hospitality, empathy, care, and farewell. So you can find them and see them translated in the display, like in the right, the left picture, but also literally in what we call talking portraits. You see it on the right side. There are testimonies where the four themes are glued in a wider context of care in a historic place to the collection and to the stories that are associated with it. And the video portraits, they tell the story of 9 everyday caregivers, new caregivers, and they testify on what care can mean in society. They not only tie in with the 4 main themes I just mentioned, but they have a broader perspective of what care is or can be. And they also invite our visitors to reflect further on certain dilemmas or deeper questions about caring for our fellow human beings in society. And the caregivers in the portraits, like for instance, Farnood here, they also talk about topics of mourning, saying goodbye. Farnood is a nurse. She works in the ER in Brussels, I think, and she has a very specific way at looking at dying because she's confronted there every day with it. So we try to combine that kind of caregiving, that kind of symbolic talking about mourning with the historical function of the museum and with the objects. We also have there Us Knops, maybe you know her. She lost her brother. She's a psychologist, a psychiatrist, I think the first one. But she tells also a story about mourning and about the fact that mourning has does something with people, and that's the important thing we want to do with the museum, having also or letting people and visitors think about that kind of themes, because of the fact that that was a very natural part in the hospital. It is still today, and especially since the pandemic, suffering and saying goodbye became a part of everyday life. In some ways, the situation then was a bit similar to the view of suffering and death in the medieval society, but especially in the sense that it was less of a taboo than it is in some cases today. On the contrary, in the Middle Ages, life on Earth, that was all about a good death of one who was a good Christian, and then you got into heaven. But now, a few years later, after the pandemic, we ask ourselves the same questions, like what does death and suffering mean to our visitors today? And much of the museum is devoted to that last universal theme of saying goodbye. But because we wanted to avoid an ending on quite a negative or difficult note, we wanted to preserve the way everyone shared their feelings about farewells during that difficult time. This led us to the creation of what we called the Whisper Sofa. The Whisper Sofa is very special. It's a living installation. It's designed by Barbara Raas and textile artist Klaas Rommelaar. And any visitor is welcome to sit in the sofa, and people can listen to testimonies about how others deal with death, stories of children of different ages and their thoughts of say goodbye, as well as people testifying about living loss and hidden grief. And the Whisper Sofa is very special. The seat is made of clothes donated by people who have lost someone dear to them. The stories about the donation and its symbolism are included in it. Museum hebben gecalled for clothing and stories. We call it, you see it on your left side, we did like a whole day also with the Vrije as a partner, where people could come to us, could donate a piece of clothing, a picture of someone they lost, and also they could tell their story. And all those stories were collected, and it was textile artist Klaas Rommelaar who later then
last minute.
Okay. Textile artist Klaas Rommelaar then transformed his concept into a living piece of art. So the sofa is something that is the most participatory way we go with along with the themes of saying goodbye. I had last one thing to say is that this also fits into the broader museum operation of reminiscence and working with people with dementia. We have guided tours. We have also like what we called tools to go to elderly homes and so on. But my time is over, so I think I will conclude here with the final project and saying that the Museum St. John's Hospital opens the way for our as a museum to further experiment with the project or tools of the programs for public mediation that connects heritage, care, and well-being. So thank you for listening to this contribution, and certainly feel free to contact me for more information.
Lieven, thank you very much. I'm very happy we've had you as a speaker, somebody from the museums. I think that was a very inspiring presentation. I will let Hannah give the floor to Emel and Annabel, but I will first introduce our next speakers. And our next speakers work at the Policy Research Unit in Palliative and End-of-Life Care at the Cicely Saunders Institute of Palliative Care Policy and Rehabilitation at King's College in London. They both worked on the Empowering Better End-of-Life Dementia Care research program. Emel Yorganci is a research associate. She recently completed her PhD focusing on identifying the patterns of healthcare use and investigating the quality of care among people with dementia nearing the end of life. Her work focused on public and policy engagement about dying with dementia and high-quality evidence-based palliative and end-of-life care. Annabel Farnood is a postdoctoral research associate. Her PhD focused on online self-diagnosis and health information seeking. She co-leads the Dementia Community Research Network, which brings community partners and researchers together. Annabel's work focuses on digital health, dementia, and palliative care. Voilà. And then if everything's okay, I think Emel will share her presentation.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I'll just quickly share, if I can. Let me see. Can you hear me now? Perfect. Can you see the screen? Perfect. Thank you very much, everyone, and I'm sorry, apologies for the delay. Today we're going to take a slightly different approach, and we will be talking about our night at a museum. And we titled our presentation, A Night at the Museum, Engaging Young People About Dying with Dementia. We had a really great introduction, so we'll keep it brief. This is from our engagement event, which took place at the Science Museum London. And this is a part of our research team. And we also have two family carers with us in this photo. This is me, this is Annabel. As already mentioned, I'm a research associate at the Policy Research Unit, but I also have a specific interest in engaging public, especially young people, about dying with dementia, and also engaging with policymakers about this topic. Annabel, would you like to very quickly introduce yourself as well? We can't hear Annabel. Nope.
Normally you can speak now, Annabel. You're unmuted.
Okay, so Bert, could you please unmute Annabel because
Yeah, she is unmuted, so
okay.
we don't hear her.
Annabel, could you check your audio settings maybe to see if it's the right speaker?
Hello, does that work?
Perfect.
Sorry, it came up with the notification saying that I wasn't allowed to unmute, but it works. Hi everyone, I'm Annabel. I'm a research associate at the Cicely Saunders Institute at King's College London, and work with Emel on the Embed Care project, which is the picture that's displayed there. And I also have shared research interest with Emel, which she just mentioned that we, and this particular interest of engaging with young people about dementia and palliative care. So I'll move on for the introduction to save a bit of time. Mel, do you want to click onto the next slide, please? Okay, so the Embed Care project, which we were showcasing at the Science Museum, Leeds, London, was this one will be presented on the screen. So the Embed Care project stands for Empowering Better End-of-Life Care for People with Dementia. And it's a 6-year funded project by the ESRC, which is the Economic and Social Research Council, and the NIHR. So the aim of what this project aims to do is to improve care to ensure people live and die well with dementia. And the project has developed an app to help healthcare professionals and family carers for people with dementia monitor and manage symptoms of people living with dementia for better and improved quality of care. And the project is split into 6 work streams, which I won't go into every single one. However, Emel and I work on several of them. So Emel, do you want to click onto the next slide, please?
Yep. So that was a bit about the Embed Care project. So it's a big project, and we were lucky enough to have the funding and time allocated to do meaningful public engagement events. During this presentation, we're going to talk a bit more about why should people, especially young people, care about living well with dementia until the end of their lives, and why it is important to disseminate research in museums. We're going to very briefly touch upon it, although this is not our expertise. And we're going to talk about our event that took place at a museum, go into details about the engagement activities, how we developed them, how well were they received. And we're going to talk through our evaluation and reflections on what went well, what could we do better, and then we're going to briefly touch upon what's happening now and what's happening next in terms of our engagement with young people about dying with dementia. So some of you might know, but why is it important for young people to know about living well with dementia? Well, we know that dementia incidence, which means number of people living with dementia, palliative care needs, and societal impact of dementia, be it economical, psychological, or physical, are increasing, and it's expected to increase substantially locally in the UK, but also globally. We know that dementia is associated with the highest increase in serious health-related suffering among all like top 20 life-limiting conditions. We also know that young people will more and more continue to be affected by dementia in the upcoming years. And then we can also see that this will be more influential in upper middle, lower middle, and low income countries. So why is it again important? We know from our work or from our previous work that there are gaps in knowledge about dying with dementia and its impact on society and what dementia and palliative care, end of life care is. So most people don't know what dementia is. To begin with, they don't know it's an umbrella term and it could be caused by multiple conditions. They don't know what palliative care is. They don't know what dementia, palliative or end-of-life care is, what these terms are, who pays for it, what can they do to help people affected with dementia. I'm going to talk a bit more about this opinion poll that we conducted, but in 2002, our research team conducted a national survey, an opinion poll, which was representative of the UK, and it involved over 2,000 people. And we asked several questions to gauge people's perceptions and knowledge. In this graph, what you're seeing is when we asked people what they thought was the leading cause of death, all age groups, so the different columns are different age groups from 18 to 24 to 55 plus, and the 18 to 24 being the bright blue one. Everyone, majority thought it was heart disease, and then cancer, and then cerebrovascular, and then dementia. Dementia is the leading cause of death in the UK. But what we also found, this is an exemplary question, but what we also found consistently as a trend in the questions was that young people, 18 to 24, way more likely to say, I don't know, to the questions when we ask them about dementia. But we also know that despite they might not feel the impacts of dementia now, young people have the greatest potential to change their dementia risk, but also improve dementia care from the point of diagnosis until the end of life into treatment for people affected now, but also for those in futures, which is likely to be themselves. Annabel, I'm handing over to you now.
Thanks, Emel. So to do this, so to be able to meet these aims of what we had planned, this is when we started on the event at the Science Museum in London. And the Science Museum in London hosts an event called Science Museum Lates, which is a public engagement event. And it runs on selected evenings, normally in the last week after each month. And the target audience, or the normal age range of the attendees that go to the event, are between 18 and 35 years old. So in order to engage with people attending the event in the most effective way, and to showcase the research that we do in the most effective way, we started to plan engagement activities. So the aim of what we were trying to do through these engagement activities was to spark meaningful conversations about what will matter to people and their families towards the end of life. And in addition to that, to consider the importance of personhood and maintaining what's important to the person with dementia as they approach the end of their lives. And as Emel presented nicely before, obviously, a lot of people might not think about this on a daily basis. So it was a brainstorming question, I guess, to discuss with young people. So to do this, we had a pop-up stand, which you can see a little bit there in the picture. We had some of the Embed Care team to come and attend the event to host it. We got bright orange t-shirts that had Ask Us Anything about dementia and palliative care on the back. And we ran 3 activities based on our research from the Embed Care project on palliative and dementia care. Do you want to go to the next slide? Thank you. So out of the 3 projects, this was one of the first ones that we created. So this was an activity called Knowing Me, Knowing You. And we made this into a card game. So the instructions in the poster that we actually used is on the right-hand side of the slide. And on the left-hand side, the orange cards are the card game. So what these aimed to do was to begin to let people start having conversations about what would normally be quite a difficult topic, and I guess something that they wouldn't normally have a conversation on a typical daily basis. So in this pack, there's an instruction card, and there's 15 cards that each have an aspect or element of the things that could be the most important to that person. So for example, towards the end of their life. So for example, that could be listening to their favorite music, having family around them. And out of these 15 cards, they have to choose their top 3. And then they play this with someone. And the person that they're playing with might be a friend, a family member. The person that they're playing with would have to guess what 3 cards they picked. And then they swapped over, and then they guessed the other person's. And there's also 2 blank cards in the pack as well. So if there was something that wasn't familiar, like that didn't relate to them that much from the pack of cards that we developed, they can write their own to make it a bit more personal. And to conclude this game, what we really just wanted to do was to let people to begin to have that type of conversation, especially when many people might not know how to begin to have those types of conversations. So this was a really good start, and it was really effective, and people were really engaged in this activity. And I guess it also gave the element of how well do you know your friend or someone that's close to you, and especially in this kind of topic area where they just wouldn't normally discuss it. So this was the first activity that we came up with. And then we'll move on to the second one, which was the wishing tree. So we have this wishing tree that we came up with, and we thought this would be more of a nice reflective activity for people attending. So we made this instruction poster as well, where we asked people to pick up a leaf, which you'll see on the right hand side, and write down what would be most important for you towards the end of life, and then to hang their leaf on the wishing tree. And this was really impactful, because it let people speak from their own true self, I guess, and people came up with multiple different types of answers. And it was a really nice way to capture people's thoughts about what they really thought about what would be important to them towards the end of life. And I guess as well, this was really it was more person-centered for that person, because they got to choose what really was. And that was normally after the other engagement activities, which was the card game, and which another one that Emel will discuss. So this normally came after that, and it was a really nice way to engage and let people think and reflect.
Right, so I'll speak about the last activity that we had, and bearing in mind we were walking around, one of the advantages of having a large team was that people could just come up to us and ask any questions about anything they want and just have conversations, in addition to actively choosing to engage. So we ensured that there were different types of engagement. So passive engagement, walking around, reading from cards, scanning QR codes and reading more about project. Active engagement, either by directly talking to us or writing on like a piece of leaf or completing the quiz. So based on the national representative online opinion poll, our final activity was developing a quiz that tested knowledge of key dementia facts based on our YouGov opinion poll. We knew from our survey that despite palliative care having the potential to improve quality of life for people with dementia, only half of the population had this understanding, and 1 in 4 people believe that palliative care is only for people close to death. So what we did was we developed a Mythbuster quiz. We had 9 questions in total, and we developed this opinion poll survey, not just by directly taking it from the previous one, but by collaborating with our public patient involvement members, asking them what they would want to see within these questions, adapting them, but also by working with our public engagement lead to have an understanding of what is the average length of surveys people tend to engage with, what's the maximum number of questions we should have, what kind of answers we should have. And we presented these surveys on tablets with options to complete on the phone as well. The things you are seeing on your bottom of your screen, the embed care, don't forget dementia, and the D words, which was the name of our stand, are stickers. One thing that people found very entertaining was us telling them that if you get 10 out of 10 marks, like, or 9 out of 9 in this case, you will get a sticker. We also told people for the card game, if you if you can guess what your partner or your friend would want from their end of life, the 3 things they picked, we will get you a sticker. People love free stickers. That's a take-home message that we had. That people also said in our evaluation that they were shocked with some of the statistics, because at the end of the quiz they could see the correct answers with some information about the research and the facts and where they came from. So, Annabel.
Thank you. So when we had finished the event, some of the planning and evaluation that we thought about afterwards. So on reflection, I think part of the success of the event came from the planning, obviously, that we had done. So I guess one part of the planning was that we visited other public engagement events to try and catch some ideas and see, and we went to another LATES event that was hosted previous to the one that we actually attended, just to see the setting and how we would set it up, and just do a bit of brainstorming about how we will conduct ours. So that was really, really helpful. And then what we thought about audience was, for anyone that is developing a public engagement event, really defining your main audience prior to that, and start tailoring the project towards that is really an important starting point. And for us in particular, it was the age group, but it could be anything really of particular interest, or another age group or anything else. And also to have clear aims of what you want to deliver. And so for us, we had clear aims from the beginning, about wanting to engage with young people, and for the reasons that Emel presented earlier. And finally, in an evaluation, I think what would have been helpful is a formal way of recording our visitors' experiences would have been valuable as well. And I think really this type of engagement is so creative, and it's a really creative way to be able to engage research with your target audience, and translating research into engagement activities and in such a unique way at a science museum is just so interesting and really unique. So yeah, I think those were some of our main reflection points. Emel, do you want to go into the next slide, please? So yeah, so some further reflections that we had, where young people are interested in the subject of dementia and the end of life care, and we had some really interesting conversations with people, and that's why we came up with the activities that we did to try and gauge people's interest and capture their thoughts of what they knew about palliative care and dementia, and we had really interesting conversations. Something else is people look for activities to do in a museum. So I think if we were just to display written research, it might have not had as much interaction, but because we had activities, we had a team there with bright orange t-shirts on, that were engaging well with the public and able to answer any questions that people had. It was something that I think brought a lot more people to the stall, and knowing that we had different activities, as Emel said, some freebies to give away as well, was really helpful. And people were willing to have open conversations about a subject that can be quite difficult to talk about. And I think, again, that was mainly based through the engagement activities and then the discussions that came after them. And I think the final 2 points is people came away feeling like they had learned something, and they could act on it, because we also had cards that people could take home with them, and we had some like the stickers and everything else. And people learned surprising facts about the lack of research and funding for dementia care, which as well came from the YouGov survey, and from the survey that we created for the stall.
I'm aware of the time, and I know we had some technical difficulties at the time, so I'll keep it quite quick. But reflecting on the role of museums in engaging public, I think it's important to highlight that we had the advantage of attending an event that was at the Science Museum. Science Museum is one of the best known museums in the world dedicated to science, and it's for science enthusiasts and everyone to go, and it is free to attend, which removes a socioeconomic barrier that might be faced in other ticketed or paid events. The specific event that we took part of, so the late, is also after hours, which means that people who are working, who have caring responsibilities, could have another extra chance to come and attend, which might not otherwise be able to do on the weekends or during working hours. This was, I think, from our experience, being part of a science late was good because people who might not necessarily attend a dementia or end of life specific event ended up coming to our stand and learning something and engaging in activities that they wouldn't have otherwise, which shows that museums could embed the themes of dying and end of life better to the exhibitions and activities.
So Emel, just as a heads up, last minute. Thank you.
Okay, I'll be super quick. Just to iterate, most people wanted to do it. Museums are places where people go to learn, and not many people read scientific articles, so I think it's a great opportunity. But just to reiterate, although museums are open for everyone, there might be some perceived misconceptions that some people don't belong in them. So we must carry on collaborating with museums while improving the accessibility of museums to everyone in the society and engage with communities outside of the formal institutions. Annabel, do you want to talk about these or shall I whiz through them?
I think just really quickly, we have some future engagement events coming up, and one's happening currently, and this is happening in London, and it's another type of engagement event that we're hosting at Science Gallery London that showcases dementia journeys towards better end-of-life dementia care. And the information is there, and yeah, this will be shared afterwards.
We also have another, this is also in a museum, another event where we will ask the public to come and join us to learn how to storytell through comics and writing. You can scan to get tickets or get in touch with us. Thank you so much for inviting us, and thank you to the team, to our funders. You can contact us for further information and we'd be happy to chat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Annabel and Emel, thank you so much for your presentation. I've seen some questions about the resources you've shown. Maybe you can send me an email and I will send it to everyone who attended afterwards. So then we have our last speaker, Professor Carol Tishelman. I'll leave it up to Hannah to unmute her and give her the rights to share her presentation. And Professor Carol Tishelman is a professor of nursing at Karolinska Institute in Sweden and holds a chair in innovative care, integrating health and social care. Professor Tishelman has a long commitment to cancer and end-of-life care research, including prevention, understanding symptoms and care delays, and improving cancer and end-of-life care by enhancing stakeholder experiences. At present, most of Professor Tishelman's research focuses on leading the transdisciplinary DOBRA research program, combining end-of-life care, public health, and health promotion. Professor Tishelman, the floor is yours.
Okay, Bert, it's very strange when you call me Professor Tishelman and not Carol. Can you see me and hear me? Because I can't control anything anymore. I don't see it. And you see the right presentation slide?
No, we
No, don't see anything? Okay. I can't, okay, let's see, Zoom. It's like I'm locked out of it for some reason. Let's see what I can do. This is what happens because Bert and I tried it and everything was working perfectly before.
Now we see you. So
Now you see me and you get the share and you get the there. Okay. And now the only problem is that I can't see it. There. Okay, you see the right picture. Thank you. Sorry. I think I have to have a pretty quick presentation here. Thank you very much for your kind introduction and for inviting me to this, because it's really fun, and it's really fun to hear the experiences from other countries. And particularly, I want to corroborate that we have very similar experiences with having an interactive event at a museum, as was described by our colleagues from King's College. So it seems like it's not only a local thing that works, but it works in different places. I'd like to talk about some research that's been generated through working with museums, as opposed to events here, that being my role. And I work with something that, let's see, this, there. I work with public health, palliative care issues. And as we all know, it takes a village not only to raise a child, but also to help people at the end of life. And one part of these villages are museums. And we've worked in a large research program that's called Dør bra, which literally means dying well, and figuratively is sort of a term for dead bra, or awesome, or something like that. We've worked with a number of different research projects and events with museums, but I'm going to talk about two of the projects that we had. One that was very early on, that was not our initiative, but it was arranged by a group of artists and craftspeople who were trying to break down the hierarchical relationship that exists between fine arts and crafts. So they developed 5 pairs of an artist and a craftsperson who didn't know each other, and decided that they were going to work to produce art and crafts that were related to the situation for dying. So they collaborated with the palliative care facility, and I was at the research and development unit there and became involved as their consultant in this. So what you see here is the exhibition, which was held at the Architecture Museum. But at the same time, once we were involved, my colleague Olive and I were involved in working with them on planning the exhibition. It also seems sort of silly not to be able to research it, as people from King's College were saying also. So what we started working with was a type of data that we worked with even later with museums, called crowdsourcing. I'm not even going to go through the whole long definition here, but it's a participatory activity. This wasn't, the first one I'm telling you about wasn't online. It usually is used online as a participative online activity. And through some kind of an open call, a group of individuals with different kinds of knowledge and number do something. So what they do is they either contribute their knowledge, their work, people crowdsource to get money, or experience for some sort of mutual benefit between the person who's putting out the call and receiving it and the person who sort of generously contributes. So both of these projects really involved a kind of crowdsourcing. The first one in person, where we formulate a question to the museum exhibition visitors who are at the Architecture Museum to see the Room for Death exhibition. And the question we formulated to them was in relation to what they were seeing also. So instead of seeing how other people had fantasized a situation and a space for death, how would you like it to be around you when you're dying? And the question was posed in both Swedish and English, and we just asked people for the country of residence and no other information about them. And we asked them to put their answers, their responses, into a small chest that was similar to a prototype that was in the exhibition. And the exhibition went for about 3 months. It's a museum that's right in conjunction with the Museum of Modern Art in Stockholm, so there are a lot of international visitors. And we got 512 responses from people from 46 countries, mostly from Sweden, but not really a majority either. And looking at them and trying to figure out what were we going to do to analyze them. the aim of our study, our investigation into what people wrote, was to look at the variation in public conceptions of desirable surroundings for death and dying. So this is what some of the examples look like. So as you can see, we got drawings, we got long pieces of text, and we got very, very short answers, a wide variety. And looking at them, we were able to categorize it into 8 different types of death that people envisioned for themselves related to this. And a lot of them, I think you can figure out what they mean. A green death were people who wanted to die surrounded by nature. A familiar death was people who mostly wrote or drew or communicated about wanting to be at home, to have people they knew and loved around them, that kind of thing. I think a lot of them are self-explanatory, and this is written up in an article, so if you're interested, you can get more detail about it. But some are maybe less explanatory, self-explanatory. Just so you know, I'm having a little trouble switching slides, so that's why there's some delay here. For example, larger than life death. People wrote things like, I want a beautiful mountainous view to be swishing through me as I will be falling down a gorge. So really fantasyful and really kind of heroic, expansive kind of statements in that category. Another one that maybe isn't self-explanatory is a sensuous death. And one example of that was, I'd like a view of the ocean. I want to be on the patio of my beautiful home, and I want my home to be surrounded by lavender fields. I want to be a sunny day with a light breeze. I want to be with my best friends enjoying a drink. I want to die laughing. So a lot of different sort of senses here. There were people who, a lot of people talked about calm and peaceful deaths, or about deaths, green deaths surrounded by nature, but also this whole kind of thing with tastes and smells and touch and a lot of different sensations in this category. Whoops, sorry. Okay, that's gone. So you don't see that. I don't even remember which one it was. But some of the reflections about this, we'd expected, given the type of exhibition it was, that people would reflect about the physical environment. But that wasn't only what it was about, but a lot of what people wrote included plot and characters. But it also raised a lot of questions about how people's preferences match the realities of place of death today, and how relevant the concept of homelikeness, which we use really, really a lot in palliative care contexts, is relevant in terms of what people are imagining for themselves. We also reacted a lot because there were quite a number of people who wanted a solitary death. And if not being alone in Sweden is a quality indicator for dying, and is that really a quality indicator for everyone? But one of the things that was most impressive in the collaboration with museums was just being able to use the exhibition as a catalyst to conversation and doing sort of participant observations around it. We could hear that this was really working in that sense, that the exhibition was raising issues, that our question meant that people were taking a kind of distant exhibition that they didn't have to be that engaged in and bringing it to themselves, and that these conversations were being fostered. So enough about that. Another project that we've had, and I'm a little scared to move because if I move forward, I can't ever move back, it seems, but is that we've used crowdsourced data to learn from people's experiences of COVID-19. And this is really crowdsourced data in the sense that it was online data during COVID. And this came about when I was considering doing a research project with a colleague from New Zealand about people's experiences, getting stories of people's experiences of living with COVID. And having worked with museums previously, I thought, well, maybe this is already being collected, this data. So I contacted one of the museums that I'd had a lot of contact with, and they said, yes, indeed, there was, and they connected me with someone else. And it turned out that there were between 20 and 30 museums and archives in Sweden that had already collected or were in the process of collecting data about people's experiences of COVID in different forms. And this was in part a response to the International Council of Museums, who urged them to support community resilience during the pandemic, in part through rapid response collection and documentation about important societal events, of which COVID, we know, was one. So the data that we got from them, and I mean, everybody was really generous, and we didn't need special ethical permission for this, because when people submitted their contributions, it was with an information that it could be used in research or in exhibitions, and a kind of opt-out clause if you didn't want your name included, or if you didn't want it online, or if you didn't want it in particular situations. But otherwise, it was free for us to use. So the data that we got, and I mean, literally within a week of contacting these museums, was between 6,000 to 7,000 narratives, interviews, pictures, and responses often to openly formulated questions. That those were voluntarily submitted, and they were from individuals ranging in age from 4 to older adults. Most of the museums had directed their collection to the general public, but there were specific collections depending on the different natures of the museums and the different people who were curating them, towards residents in elder care, to health and elder care staff, to school children, and to retired people. We've also later gotten data that unions collected and work life organizations collected about the effects on work life in particular. And all these collections had different formats, and they had different trigger questions. But when you looked at the responses, they were really similar. They were formulated slightly differently, but people were talking about their experiences. And we thought it would be possible to combine it together and use AI as a means of using sort of natural word processing to be able to sort this data. And I have to say that in my long research career, this was one of the least successful things I've ever done. We were able to do it, but I didn't think that the results were particularly meaningful, which was a little sad, but also we can talk about that on another occasion. We've written 4 articles about using one particular, or using 2 sets of data here. One of the sets was that I think Anna Hader, who I think is maybe listening now, who's a curator at a museum in the southern part of Sweden, had initiated the collection of, which was about what people were most afraid of during COVID. And we did, along with Anna, a longitudinal analysis of data over time from the same people who responded. And I have to say that this makes me particularly happy, because we've just been funded, or Anna has just been funded for a larger exhibition about the fears, power, and lust, it's going to be called, that should happen soon. So that's one means of disseminating. Otherwise, that's another problem about doing research that we've encountered based on data from museums, is that we were hoping that the museums would want the data back to be able to show it, but we haven't been able to foster that collaboration, in part because of funding. So what I am going to show you is one of the analyses we've done that's based on the Children's Archive, the Swedish Archive of Children's Art, which is an incredible resource. Even though it was only founded in 1977, it has children's pictures and drawings and artwork from centuries. And they put out a call through their network, and particularly to schools, for art from children and adolescents during the first COVID wave, where they asked the children between 4 and 20 years old. I don't know if you call a 20-year-old a child, but they didn't think they were children either, and nobody submitted it. They asked to draw what the pandemic situation feels like, looks like, what is different now, and share anything else that they wanted to. This database has a collection of over 1,200 pictures from 4 years old to 18-year-olds. And we went through it in our research group that in this case consisted of 6 people, 2 from Germany, 1 with a very international background, but really different backgrounds. And we pulled out all the pictures that we thought had recognizable depictions of anything related to death systems or end of life or caregiving during COVID. We also have another article that is almost done now, looking at the relationship between ecological threat and COVID in children's pictures. So, but what we found when we analyzed this was that the children really divided up, had two primary themes in their pictures. One was reactors or actors to COVID, who, since they were often very passive, we called reactors, and the other were victims to COVID. And when we sorted the data, they could be in different categories. Some pictures are about more than one thing. But if we start and look at the different types of actors or reactors, by far the most active subject was the COVID particle itself, the COVID molecule. There were 41 pictures showing the COVID particle itself, as you see here, really influenced by media depictions of what COVID looked like. And COVID particles were only shown as victims 9 times. But this was also the actor with the most sense of agency. Here you can see a picture of a COVID molecule chasing a woman down, trying to get her. Another group were healthcare and healthcare professionals. And we say healthcare because it was also healthcare artifacts as actors. So you can see in the picture on the bottom left, there's just an injection coming from nowhere. And remember, this is during the first wave, so it's long before there were any vaccines, but a kind of magic injection coming now and down and injecting COVID to save us all. On the picture on the top right, there's a healthcare person in protective clothing all the way on the side on the right. And we're pretty confident that this is a healthcare professional because Sweden had a very different response to COVID than many other places, and nobody else was wearing protective clothing, including masks at this point. And the picture at the bottom right is maybe the one that shows healthcare professionals in the most caring and active role that they're shown in altogether, where they seem to be helping create a bubble and protect people who are sitting on the ground there, surrounded by a very dystopic scenario, I think. There were very few pictures where anybody from civil society were reacting to COVID, and or acting in response to COVID. And most of the time, these were through reflections, as you can see in the picture on the lower left, which we believe to be a self-portrait, but we don't know that, where somebody's just asking a lot of questions about what's going to happen. And there were a whole bunch of pictures with a person in the middle and a lot of questions. On the bottom right, I blocked out the name that was on the shield, the mouth shield. And there you can see it was the drawer who is heroic, him or herself, with some kind of weapon in his hand and saying that they don't like COVID and that people can die of COVID. And finally, bye-bye COVID. And on the top, above that, you can see one of the only collective responses, or an active kind of response from humanity in general, pushing back at COVID. But that was a category with very few people. If we look at the victims and the variation in the victims, COVID particles were, as I said, also victims in a few cases, somebody again injecting a COVID molecule, and a dragon saying that Corona should die because it sucks, on the right. One of the largest groups in this analysis were unidentified people, which isn't strange considering that it was really at the start of, these pictures are from the start of the pandemic during the first wave. And a lot of people didn't know people who had COVID yet, a lot of children. And this group, there were 3 different types of pictures. One was conceptualizing victims through information. As you can see on the top left, or can't see, it's statistics, the number of people who've died so far and the number of people who are affected. We put together one group where victims were conceptualized through humanization. And these always had a picture of a body or some sort of living person in one way or the other, either sick or dead. Here you can see it's a person being taken over by COVID molecules. And in the last sort of subcategory here, it was through symbols. So you can see the hospital has a row of crosses. A lot of symbols came up with people being symbolized, or unidentified people being symbolized through cemeteries, through gravestones with no names, through crosses, that kind of thing. But there were also some identifiable victims, whether human or not. On the right, you can see by roles, it's Mama and Papa, and somebody's saying that I'm frightened that my family and I are going to get sick. And whereas on the left, it's Steve from Minecraft, and it says RIP for rest in peace, Steve. And there was a small, but I think important group of pictures where the drawer themselves was the victim. So you can see on the left, there's a girl looking in the mirror and she sees the sort of the symbol of death. And on the picture on the right, where I've also blocked out the name, it's the drawer whose gravestone it is on that year. So in summary, I think one of the things that we see, and that we've been able to see in all three presentations, or in the first anyway, also, is that drawing and art is a different type of means for reflection and helps express something that's beyond words, art and music and that kind of thing. What we've seen here is that COVID was seen as an active and aggressive agent, whereas people were generally portrayed as reactive, as passive, and pretty much at a loss of what to do in the situation, which is a really adequate representation of what was going on in society at that point. There are few members of civil society depicted at all. Active behavior is often fantastical, sort of heroic. And while a lot of the research and a lot of the discussion about children and COVID has focused on psychological aspects when it's sort of researcher stimulated, that seems to be where the focus is. In these pictures, we see biological, metaphysical, and psychological aspects all mixed up together. And I think that a real key to what this data is showing, and what I think is an important role for museums, is in helping us deal with what can be called epistemological uncertainty. And I don't usually use words like epistemological because they make most people, including me, feel stupid. But what's meant by it is really an inherent, when our inherent capacity to know the world around us is limited, where we're on totally uncertain territory. And I think that the role of museums in these situations is a really key one. So I think there are a bunch of takeaway messages. One is in terms of COVID, where we saw that there was a need for real guidance and support and an awareness that children absorb information even when it's not intentionally provided, and that they have fears and concerns that need to be addressed. But that there's also a need for some sort of death education for both children and adults, especially in times of epistemological uncertainty, because the adults are the ones who either silence things or bring them to the table to be talked about very often. And what about the role of museums? I think that they have a unique role in helping us understand our experiences, because they are curators in terms of collecting, preserving, mediating, exhibiting, and also conducting research about our material and immaterial cultural heritage, with testimonies about people in the world from the past, from the present, and about the future. And they've also proven themselves to be incredibly adaptable. So I'm not going to repeat that about the International Council of Museums, but I do want to end with the words of Mark O'Neill, who wrote an article about museums and mortality, and really emphasize the point that museums have an important role to play in the primary cultural work of creating meaning in the face of human mortality. And I think you can see this, actually, it kind of sums up all three of our presentations. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I would like to
those
thank all speakers for being here today and giving heterogeneous but very interesting presentations. Unfortunately, we went a little bit over time, so there's not too much time anymore for questions. If somebody has a question, please do raise your hand through reactions, and we will unmute you so you can raise your you can ask your question. No questions? If not, I will ask a question, especially to Lieven, if he's still here. I think Lieven is still here. Yeah, he is. Okay. You mentioned that the Soul Repair Cafe was too intense for visitors. So I'm wondering, what have you learned from that, from such an event?
What did we learn? We learned that it's sometimes a good idea is everything, I think. But I said turning it into something that works for the public is sometimes quite difficult when you tackle topics like this. And I think the things we want to do is storytelling and doing things that are meaningful. Sometimes we, especially the artists that participated, we had Sekou, who was our museum poet. He was at first very eager to do this, and afterwards he said that he honestly was like quite dead after that Soul Repair Cafe. So there we questioned our role and also the role of the museum in that kind of difficult questions. So it's hard to stress what we learned from it. But we learned that having a place in society is very important for us, and that also going to other experts, like for instance Peter and Reve, is also very important. So the collaboration with other partners will take us also further in that kind of discussions and ideas.
Thank you. I'm really mindful of the time. I think we should maybe stop here. I will distribute all the email addresses to everyone who has attended the meeting, and you can contact them directly with your questions. Sorry, we went a bit over time, but I think those were very interesting presentations. I hope you feel a little bit inspired at least to do something yourself and that you learned something new. Your email addresses will be added to the COCO mailing list, so you will stay updated about future events. And I would like to thank you for being here today, and have a great rest of the week.